So, is the first year of marriage really the hardest? Had you asked me this question prior to getting married, I probably would have said no. Hello and welcome to another episode of Treasure Talks with Thandi. This is a platform where we communicate ideas that transform your spiritual life, your relationships, and your mindset. So, is the first year of marriage really the hardest? Had you asked me this question prior to getting married, I probably would have said no. I would have said, how could it be a difficult time when it's supposed to be a honeymoon phase, right? But I found that that was not the reality for me. So as I started talking to other people, I realized that the first year of marriage being a difficult phenomenon is actually something that exists. I think my main issue with realizing that the first year of marriage was so challenging for us is the fact that there was a deafening silence about it. I didn't get to hear other couples talk about the fact that they were also going through a tough time in their first year of marriage, or that they had gone through tough times in their first year of marriage. And so it almost felt like this was a phenomenon that was only happening to us, and yet the reality and truth was that a lot of people have been experiencing it, a lot of people are still experiencing it, and a lot of other couples are still yet to experience it in their first year of marriage. For us, really, the truth only came out because we became transparent with what we were going through in our first year of marriage. And so it was only as we were asking and communicating about our challenges to others that others also felt comfortable to expose the fact that it's something that they had gone through, or it's something that they were still also going through. So you can imagine that since then we've obviously had to learn lessons that helped us to navigate ourselves from that place of disillusionment to a place of homeostasis in our marriage. And here are those strategies that have helped us as a couple, and I hope they'll be able to help you as well. So strategy number one is negotiate and renegotiate and never stop. Negotiate, renegotiate, and never stop negotiating. Because when you come together as a couple, you come with different childhood backgrounds, different dating experiences, bad habits that we've picked up along life, different spiritual temperatures, right? Expectations of what women must do and what men must do. For instance, when I came into marriage, I had previously lived by myself for a very long time. And so I had bad habits that I wasn't even aware that I had picked up from my single life. So it's not just bad habits in relationships, but you can be single for a long time and actually also pick up bad habits from independence. And so I came with my bad habits, he came with his bad habits. So there were a lot of things that we obviously had to negotiate and renegotiate, and that includes negotiating your place in the marriage, negotiating children and discipline in the marriage, negotiating finances, negotiating sex. Everything requires negotiation. So the second strategy is put internal boundaries and external boundaries in place. So the internal boundaries would refer to how the two of you treat each other, right? And how far you can escalate, say for instance, a conflict situation. How far you're going to escalate that energy will really be determined by the internal boundaries that you've put around each other. And the advice I can give on that is that when you are having a conflict situation and it is heated, the boundary that you should put in place is to remember who you're fighting with, right? This is not your enemy, this is your friend. And so that's a boundary that you can put around those conflicting times, that you do not escalate the conflict beyond repair. And so the external boundaries really refer to the people in our lives, families, our friends, our colleagues. You obviously walk into marriage with a vast array of other relationships, right? Like your friends, your families, and sometimes children are involved, sometimes baby mamas, baby daddies are also involved. Those are the people that you need to put boundaries around. Strategy number 3, the two of you have to make decisions on the division of labor and finances. So for instance, I am not a domestic goddess at all. I don't want to spend hours slaving away at a pot or with a broom or with a vacuum cleaner. That is just not me. And I understand that, and I've always known that about me. But I also know that there are women like that. And that's okay, because that's who they are and they enjoy it and they thrive in that space. I don't. I'm not willing to push myself in domestic chores to a point of burnout whilst you are sitting and watching me and not contributing. That is not the type of marriage I envision for myself, because that just does not speak partnership to me, and that's just me. And I understand other women feel, I love this, I want to do this, I want to serve my husband in this way. I've got different ways I love to serve my husband in, and that he enjoys. Being a domestic goddess is just not one of them for me. It's important to have those discussions prior to marriage. That is why you don't want to lie and present a certain version that you will not be able to maintain in marriage whilst you are dating. Show up as yourself. Show up as the person that says, if you want to marry someone who's a domestic goddess, I am not that person, so I suggest that you move along, or we can negotiate this point in as far as how far are you willing to bend over backwards and not break your back. So strategy number 4, continue to cultivate your own relationship with God. Yes, it's important that when you are married, so important that the two of you as a couple get together and you pray together and you have devotions together and you study scriptures together and you watch sermons together. So it's important that you cultivate the soul of the marriage through all those spiritual disciplines. Salvation is very personal, and that's not something that changes within marriage. It's still important that you present yourself to God as His child, as an individual. Have your own prayer time, own Bible study time, have your own time worshiping. Do not put pressure on each other's spiritual lives by trying to force the other person to have the same spiritual temperature that you have, right? Allow your spouse's relationship with God to thrive at its own pace and not the way that you think it ought to thrive. Your spiritual relationship with God requires that you pray 7 times and that you study the Bible. That does not mean that your spouse must walk or run at the same pace as you for their relationship with God to be legitimate. So you need to allow your spouse their space to cultivate their own relationship in a manner that honors God and grows your spouse. The 5th strategy, and this is a bonus strategy, actually comes from my husband. When I was preparing to do this show, I asked him if he were to advise anyone on the first year of marriage, what would he say? And what he said was, be willing to unlearn. Be willing to unlearn. What he explained by that was that when he walked into marriage, he did not realize just how toxic he was as a man. He says the fact that he walked into our marriage thinking that he can get away with not contributing the basic survival skills, expecting the wife to do that. He now realizes just how abusive that mindset was. It was a mindset that he picked up from what he was taught about what a man ought to do and what a woman ought to do. The biggest thing he's had to unlearn is his toxic masculinity. And that is his biggest strategy, that just be willing to unlearn. Don't be so hard-headed and so set in your ways that you're not willing to unlearn and that you're not willing to challenge your own belief system. And I think that's such a great strategy. Let me know in the comments below if your husband also came into the marriage with bad habits and what those habits were and how you sorted it out. As you can tell, the first year of marriage can be challenging, and how the two of you handle your marriage in the first year can set you up or break you apart. I pray that you will choose to respect your marriage so much that you will put the internal boundaries in place and the external boundaries in place, and that you will remember in those moments of conflict that your husband or your wife is not your enemy in those moments. They are still your friend, and there's a hurdle of conflict that you need to get over together. I will be back next week with another episode full of ideas that transform your spiritual life, your relationships, and your mindset.